Good evening, listeners.
How are we today?
We've not gone mad.
No.
Well, not completely.
We're all
Just
mad
mostly.
here.
Yeah. Firstly, apologies that we haven't podcasted in a while, but global pandemic, it is a thing.
Yep, and we couldn't find a recordable version that we liked enough to be able to record virtually.
Yeah, I mean, we tried it before with the Titanic one, but for some reason the microphone didn't work and it just picked it up on my laptop speakers, which was not very good.
Yeah, but that one's still doing quite well. For some reason, we're being listened to a lot at the moment.
Yeah, we've had a huge surge of listens. We really, really do appreciate that.
Definitely.
Today we are trialing something new because we do have obviously a love for everything historical, but we do also like the darker side of history because it's interesting. And we've decided to look at the dark cup of history.
Yes, this is the first episode of possibly a new, segment? Would it be called segment? Or is it new branch of our podcast?
Yeah, like when you leave the tea bag in too long and it gets kind of stewy and syrupy, and then you drink it's like a kick in the teeth, but in a good way.
Yeah. These episodes will be of a darker nature, either physically darker, as in things that go bump in the night, the supernatural, that sort of thing, or they could be the darker, more gruesome sides of history that possibly some of our younger listeners may want to get their parents to listen to first.
Yeah, parental advisory is advised.
Yep, and this one will not be a dark cup of history tea. It would be a dark cup of history wine, but that doesn't really sound good.
Did your lights just flicker? Wow.
What a great way to start. So today we're going to discuss maybe the most infamous paranormal investigators that inspired some of the most, I don't know if loved is the right word, but most watched horror movies and TV shows. They've written numerous books, as well as we'll be delving into the true stories behind some of their spookiest cases.
And we will also find out why rubbing a ring on a mummified hand will not bring forth a genie, but something quite less useful.
Yep.
So, the family that we will be discussing today is the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine Warren. So, Ed Warren, he was born Edward Warren Miney on the 7th of September 1926 in Bridgeport, Connecticut in the USA. He was a self-taught and self-professed demonologist, author, and lecturer as well. He used to go around with his wife giving a lot of lectures on paranormal investigations. Sadly, Ed is no longer with us. He did die on the 23rd of August 2006 at the age of 79 in Monroe, Connecticut, USA.
Yep, so then you have Lorraine Warren. She was born Lorraine Rita Moran on January the 31st, 1927, again in Bridgeport, Connecticut in the US. She was a professed clairvoyant and a light trance medium who worked closely with her husband. So like you said before, they used to go and do lectures, give talks, that sort of thing together. And she sadly is no longer with us either. She died on the 18th of April 2019, so last year, at the ripe old age of 92 in Monroe, Connecticut. So they kind of stayed where they were born, in Connecticut, in the state.
Yeah, both born in the same place, both died in the same place, but obviously a couple of decades apart.
Yeah.
When Ed was 16 years old, he worked as an usher at the Colonial Theatre in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where Lorraine and her mother were regulars. Ed befriended Lorraine when he saw her there, and they began dating. And then in 1945, Ed enlisted into the Navy on his 17th birthday, and he was deployed for just 4 months before his ship was sunk in the North Atlantic.
And for those of you who don't know, 1945 is obviously the end of World War II.
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry.
We need to get back in the swing of it.
We do.
After Ed's ship was sunk, he returned to stateside on a 30-day kind of survivor's leave, which we would nowadays call it like respite or rest. You know, they go and have the rest and relaxation. They recuperate from being overseas. But while he was home,
sinking.
well, yeah, that's not great. No. And but while he was home, they got married and they became Mr. and Mrs. Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Woo!
After they got married, Ed concluded serving in the Navy, for that he started in World War II, and returned home, where he and Lorraine had a daughter called Judy in 1951.
Who I believe is still alive.
Yeah.
Ed had a bit of a talent for painting, and he enrolled in Yale's art subsidiary, the Perry Art School. But his paintings tend to depict mostly haunted houses throughout Connecticut and other ghostly works.
So you can always see that the paranormal is kind of starting from quite a young age.
Yeah. He withdrew from the school after 2 years, and then the couple set up like pop-up stands throughout tourist areas in Massachusetts, Vermont, Rhode Island, and coastal Connecticut to sell those paintings.
That was quite a cool idea, doing little pop-up things.
Yeah.
They authored many books about the paranormal and about all of their private investigations that they did into various reports of paranormal activity. They claimed to have investigated like well over 10,000 cases during their career, and they were among some of the first investigators in the so-called Amityville hauntings, which we will get onto. They also, in 1952, they started what is known as the New England Society for Psychic Research, or the NESPR. NESPR. That has quite a ring to it. I like it when you've got like names of things that have nice little acronyms.
Like SHIELD.
Dude, not okay. It was founded in Ed's interest in the paranormal when it went beyond his paintings and his drawings.
Okay.
And when he heard of any report of a structure being haunted, he and Lorraine, who was a skeptic at this time, would travel to the site and investigate it.
Fair enough.
He actually needed, obviously, to find a way, because there was a lot of skeptics. There still are a lot of skeptics.
Oh, yeah.
But back then there was quite a few. So he had to find a way of befriending the family and kind of like to get into their house. So what he would do was he would stand out in the street and he would sketch the house. He would then approach the homeowners with the sketch as like a friendly gesture and get invited into the home, and it worked.
Okay. So with NESPA, the New England Society for Psychic Research, they used a variety of individuals with including medical doctors, researchers, police officers, nurses, college students, and members of the clergy in its investigation. So it wasn't just limited to the two of them. They used a lot of people from a lot of different professions, and ones like your doctors and your police, where they carry a lot of authority.
Yeah.
People would believe them. They were members of the Roman Catholic Church, and they thought that demonic forces are likely to possess those who lack faith, which it's a common thing in the Catholic Church that if you don't have the faith, you don't have the strength of Christ behind you, you are more likely to be susceptible to demons and demonic influences.
Yeah. Stories of ghost hauntings were popularized by the Warrens, obviously, and they have been adapted and have inspired directly or indirectly dozens of films, television series and documentaries, like we said before. But there has been 17 films in the Amityville horror series, which I didn't know there'd been that many made about the Amityville horror. I've only seen the 2 movies that we'll talk about later on, as well as 7 films in the Conjuring universe, which I know that you've seen most of.
Yeah, I think the only ones I haven't seen are The Nun and The Conjuring 2. But I have a thing, I don't particularly like religious ghosts.
I've seen The Nun, because because I know they all came out differently, in like different, they didn't come out, I think The Conjuring's first, and they did Annabelle, which was obviously the prequel to The Conjuring, but then they did The Nun, which was the prequel to Annabelle. So I've seen The Nun, so I wanted to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I've seen that one. But then there is also an occult museum, and the NESPA, NESPR, is now ran by Ed and Lorraine's son-in-law, Tony.
Yeah.
So they have a museum, basically in like the back of their house, where they kept all of the different artifacts and different items that they believed were cursed or had some sort of spiritual entity to it, which they then kept and they didn't dispose of, because that's completely the wrong word. Contain, that's the word I was looking for, where they could contain them correctly and properly to keep them safe.
I think, if I remember rightly, they get, in this occult museum, this area, they get it blessed once a month, and certain exhibits, which we'll be coming on to in a second, are blessed on a weekly basis and kept in tightly locked glass cases.
Yeah. So we've spoken a bit about that is the Warrens basically, in the nutshell, and it's not that much about them specifically because it was about what they did was why they were famous. So we're going to go into a few of their cases that have inspired some of the most well-known horror movies, TV shows and such, and we'll get into the true stories of them.
And we're starting with a big one, the one that even the thought of it makes me shiver.
Yep, definitely. So we're going to start with Annabelle. So I don't know how much if you've seen the real Annabelle doll.
I have seen.
I personally think the real Annabelle doll is creepier than the one they use in the movie.
Can I just point out, whilst we're recording this at this moment in time, there is a China doll sitting looking at me on your bookcase.
Leave Daisy alone.
That's not Daisy, that's demonic.
No, my grandma used to collect them, and when she passed away, we all got to have one.
I'm sorry, was your grandma a Satanist?
No, she was big Christian. And Maddie, my little sister, hates China dolls, especially Daisy, because she says her head looks funny.
I used to have a couple when I was growing up, but I had a China doll of a nun.
Why?
Mum got it for me, and I genuinely, Mum still has it, and it's in the spare room. It used to be Mum's and Dad's bedroom. It's now the spare room. And when I was working from home during the start of lockdown, when I went and stayed with Mum for a bit, it was there, and I could feel its little beady glass eyes on my back. I was like, "Don't you stay on that side of the room, otherwise I'll punch you out of the window, no matter how expensive you are." She even had a little tiny Bible, and a little rosary, and everything. Little.
Are we okay, Carrie?
Minion of evil.
Right. How about you just take a breath, have another sip of your wine, and I'll talk about Annabelle. So the please do not dribble wine all over my bed.
Sorry, I'm good. Are
we good? Right. So this is the true story of Annabelle we're going to start with. So a student nurse was given a Raggedy Ann doll as a gift from a second-hand store, and she brought it home to where she lived with her roommate. Her mum bought it for her as a gift because, as like a well done, you've gotten into medical school to be a nurse.
Cute idea.
Yeah, and it was like a Raggedy Ann doll. So we didn't really have Raggedy Ann here in the UK, but I know in America it was quite...
It was quite big. They're sweet-looking dolls.
Yeah. Creepy, though. Like, because they are just, like, cotton, I guess, and just the smile and everything. But, yeah, and almost immediately, the roommate noticed, like, strange things happening with the doll. For example, the nurse would leave the doll on the couch, only to return to find her sitting in her bedroom.
Nope.
On other days, she would go out knowing that she'd left Annabelle's legs uncrossed and would come home seeing the legs intertwined, like cross-legged.
Obviously, the nurses became concerned with their inanimate objects' subtle movements, sometimes not so subtle, especially when they discovered parchment papers with the words "Help me" written in crayon scattered around the apartment. The women obviously had no idea where the parchment paper came from, as they had none stored in their complex. I mean, it's rare enough to find parchment paper here in England, but to find it in America, a relatively new country, y'all didn't really have parchment.
Yep. One morning, the nurses were eating breakfast. So they were just, before they went to work, they were just sitting together eating some breakfast in the kitchen. Annabelle's two flimsy little cloth arms levitated onto the table.
I mean, I'm assuming she was sitting there and the arms levitated up, not that the arms detached and levitated onto the table.
Yeah, they were sitting there and they just kind of raised.
Okay, question. Why would you have Annabelle at your breakfast table if you thought she was haunted?
It gets into that. It kind of, we'll get into that. There is a reason for it. And they kind of started to believe that there was like paranormal activity going on at this time. And they were oddly fascinated by the doll.
Okay, I get that.
And one of the nurses decided that the doll's actions meant that she was trying to communicate with them. So they decided now it would be a good idea to contact a psychic. Now, this wasn't the Warrens yet. The Warrens come in later. This was just a psychic. And they were introduced to a medium who told them that the doll was inhabited by the spirit of a young girl who was about 6 or 7, and her name was Annabelle Higgins, hence why she was then called Annabelle.
Okay.
Now, this is where it gets to what I mean about the whole arms, having the doll sat at the lunch table. The 2 roommates tried to accept the doll spirit and began treating it more like a human than a doll.
Ooh.
And for a while, everything was fine. Until one night, the fiance of one of the nurses, who was called Lou, was staying over. He was sleeping on the couch when suddenly Annabelle appeared at the opposite end of the sofa next to him. He didn't think anything of it. I mean, I'm not sure why he didn't, but he didn't. He went to sleep. He woke up and he was startled and he was sweating. One of his fiancé asked him what was wrong, to which he said that he'd had a nightmare. And in the dream, Annabelle was crawling up his legs, got to his neck, was trying to strangle him to death. Quite a freaky ass nightmare. I mean, I don't think I would like to dream about a doll trying to kill me.
Overly? No,
No?
it's not up there on my list.
But being, I don't know, being, I guess, hot-headed that he was, he reacted to this by picking up Annabelle and throwing her across the floor.
Smooth.
This didn't go well. He then started to belittle the doll, because obviously his fiancée and the friend were trying to tell him that no, we treat her like it's a human, it's not just a doll. He decided to belittle the doll, Annabelle, and start shouting across the room that she is nothing more than a Raggedy Ann doll and can't hurt anyone. She was nothing.
Literally, as soon as he launched her, he said to have provoked the demonic presence attached to it. Now, it's a thing in ghost hunting, stuff like that, paranormal research and investigation, that not all child spirits are what they seem. A lot of the time, they are not child spirits, they are something inhuman, otherworldly, and they know that humans show a sympathy towards children, and therefore they mimic children, such as Annabelle Higgins, to try and get that sympathy, to try and get that acceptance. And once you've accepted them and said, it's okay for you to be here, boom, they are there. You've got a hell of a time, pardon the pun, getting rid of them. So this demonic presence had attached itself to the doll, and Lou's actions provoked it, and he had 7 psychic wounds appearing on his body, 4 slash marks on his chest, 3 on his stomach. They cropped up like claw marks or scalpel incisions on his flesh, so I can imagine like the sudden pain. The attack was indicative that the spirit tied to the doll was far more sinister than any 6-year-old girl.
Yeah. This is when Ed and Lorraine
Warren.
Shush. This is when Ed and Lorraine were called in, and they pronounced that the doll was demonically possessed. They had a priest come in to do an exorcism on the whole apartment to cast out any spirits. And afterwards, Ed took the doll with him for safekeeping. He placed her in the back seat of his vehicle. So he got in the car, put her in the back. And he claimed that the entire way home he experienced car trouble, similar to the car trouble seen at the start of the movie Annabelle Comes Home.
Yeah, that is a little bit extreme car trouble. I'm not going to say anything because you haven't seen the film, but yeah, it's car trouble and then some.
Yeah, they removed the doll from the house, from the nurse's house, and encased it in a glass box to contain the evil spirited entity, and put it on display in their museum, where it still sits today. And on the box, like it says in the movie, it says like,
"Do not touch, do not open."
Yep.
Blah 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 blah.
Yep.
Tony Spira says that the Annabelle doll is get your words out, accurately portrayed in the films, at least according to the mythology of the museum. The main difference between the New Line Cinema's Annabelle and the Occult Museum's doll is the appearance, with the Hollywood doll made out of porcelain to maybe mimic fears of China dolls, which I get, but somehow I think it would be more terrifying if it was a Raggedy Ann doll.
Yeah, the Raggedy Ann doll unnerves me. Because with China dolls, we are made to not believe, but if their head moves, you can kind of explain it. because
Yeah.
you kind of expect it because they look creepy. Like you said, my doll sitting there. We'll put a picture on Instagram of the doll that we're staring at.
Yeah.
But you could kind of expect that her head moves when you move the doll.
It's like a haunted teddy bear.
Yeah.
Somehow that would be more terrifying because you don't expect it.
No.
In the film, there is actually a nod to the original Annabelle because obviously you've got the porcelain doll Annabelle.
There will be some spoilers. So spoilers.
It's not a massive spoiler.
No, but I'm just saying for the whole throughout this podcast.
Fair enough. But there's a bit where one of the characters is watching a TV show, like a game show, and one of the winnings is a Raggedy Ann doll. So that's a nice little nod to the original Annabelle. So yeah, but in the films she's a China doll.
Yeah.
Creepy looking one.
Before Lorraine died, she actually said of Annabelle that looks can be deceiving. It's not what the doll looks, or it's not like how the doll looks that makes her scary. It's what the doll is infused with. And with Annabelle, that was evil.
Yeah, it's evil. There were towards the start of the pandemic and everything, when things are like you had the bushfires in Australia, you had World War III, you had everything like that all going on, and then we had notification that Annabelle had escaped.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, oh my god. I don't think it was actually that Annabelle, I think it was the porcelain doll Annabelle that had escaped. But even so, just popping up on my Twitter reading that Annabelle has escaped, I thought, oh well, this is just 2020.
Yeah, like it didn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Didn't surprise me at all.
I think I read that out to you and went, huh, we're screwed.
Yeah, pretty much. Almost like then, didn't you say, and the next thing will be when the Ravens leave the Tower of London. And then the next day, the Ravens are leaving the Tower of London.
They're getting bored because nobody's there to visit them. So they were walking away and leaving the tower and having to be herded back. I was like, oh, I should not have talked this up.
Yeah, 2020. Nothing would surprise me.
No, I mean, we've still got Halloween to come.
Yeah, but there's still like 2.5 months left of this year.
Yeah, there will be a 32nd of December.
There will be, definitely.
Yeah, it's just like New Year's comes and you just hear this big booming voice going, round 2.
Yeah, like, welcome to the next level of Jumanji.
Oh, God.
Cool, so that's Annabelle. So another famous case that the Warrens had was the Perron family. They were situated in Harrisonville, Rhode Island, and they were living there. It's like this nice family, and at first there was like small things going on around the house as soon as they moved in, like brooms would go missing or would seem to move from place to place by themselves. They would hear like something scraping against the kettle in the kitchen when nobody was in there.
I tried to scrape on my glass, but then I realised it's glass and you can't do that. So
Cool.
I was trying to create an ambience.
Okay. And small piles. This would piss me off. Small piles of dirt would be just there in the middle of a newly cleaned floor.
Oh, come on.
That's like, when they're like tiny little inconveniences. Like people say, like, what would you do if you could inconvenience someone? I would like make sure their show didn't record or make their battery die on their phone.
Or turn their cups upside down in the cupboard.
Yeah, so little inconvenience, that would piss me off. Imagine cleaning the house.
Tear open all their tea bags.
Yeah, right. Imagine turning around in a nice clean house and seeing little pockets of dirt everywhere.
Yep.
Cool. But anyway, so for the most part, they were pretty harmless. However, it then started to grow and things started to get a bit more angry.
Carolyn Perron allegedly researched the history of the home and discovered that it had been in the same family for 8 generations and that many of them had died under mysterious or horrible circumstances. Several of the children had drowned in a nearby creek, one was murdered, and a few of them hanged themselves in the attic.
Yeah, so that's not great.
No.
Obviously, you'll realise and recognise this because this is from The Conjuring. This is all based on the very first Conjuring. That it was said the house itself was said to be haunted by a witch from the 19th century named Bathsheba Sherman. Now that is the main ghost or villain in the first Conjuring.
Yeah.
And she was a real person.
Okay.
And over the 10 years that the family lived in the house, the Warrens made multiple trips to investigate it. At one point, Lorraine conducted a seance to attempt to contact the spirits that were possessing the family and were haunting the house. During that seance, Carolyn Perrin, who was the mum, became possessed. She was speaking in tongues and was rising from the ground in her chair.
One of the daughters, I think the oldest daughter, was actually secretly watching the seance.
Yeah.
She saw that.
That genuinely happened.
Yeah.
And she said that it was not her mum's voice. It was not her mum speaking a language she'd never heard before. But after the seance, Roger, who was the father, the husband of Carolyn, kicked the Warrens out, worried about his wife's mental stability.
Understandable.
Yeah, definitely. And according to Angia, who was the girl that you said secretly saw this, the family continued to live in the house due to financial instability. They could not leave.
Yeah.
Until 1980, at this point, when they were able to leave, the spirits were actually silenced and the hauntings had ceased. But they still had been there long enough to know they didn't want to stay there anymore, even if things had calmed down.
Yeah. So based on the Warrens' research, the witch had cursed this piece of land so that any inhabitants would eventually suffer a painful and untimely death. In this case, as you say, inspired the 2013 film The Conjuring, which Lorraine Warren actually was a consultant on. So obviously they did some dramatic license in it, including something that happened at the end, which didn't necessarily happen. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say.
You can say anything.
Oh yeah, you've said spoilers.
We'll put a spoiler in the description.
Yeah.
So if anyone listens and gets pissed off with us, we would have warned you.
At the end, Ed Warren performs an exorcism.
Okay.
And they didn't do that exorcism. They did the séance at the end because he's not a wasn't a licensed exorcist, so he could not have performed it. But they did that for like dramatic license. So
cool.
Yeah,
that's fun. So yeah, that kind of Annabelle and The Conjuring.
Yeah,
they are the big ones at the moment. I think they're the horror movies that have kind of dominated cinemas for like the last 7-8 years.
Yeah. But another film that dominated when we were younger, a little bit, and one that it's one of the things that influenced me into looking into the paranormal, because I don't know a huge amount about this, but I remember people talking about it. I was like, oh my God, this is terrifying. The Amityville Horror.
Yes. The movie you're thinking of came out in 2005, the one with Ryan Reynolds. And I think that was the first time I'd seen Ryan Reynolds in a film where he wasn't being hilarious.
Yeah.
He was like serious, and I think that was very clever.
I've not seen it yet.
Have you not seen the Ryan Reynolds version?
I haven't.
Guess what we're watching?
Amityville Asylum, which, I mean, props to the actors and the writers and everything, but the film was shocking.
Nah, we need to watch Amityville Horror. We will. Okay. We will watch it, and next time we podcast, I will get Carrie to say how what she thought of it. But anyway, we'll go into the actual true story before we start talking about the films.
Okay.
So Amityville is on the Long Island, is on a small island,
Long Island town of Amityville, New York.
I got excited. I started talking about Ryan Reynolds. I need to calm myself.
Do you want me to say this bit?
Yes, please.
So in 1974, in the small Long Island town of Amityville, New York, 23-year-old Ronald Defoe Jr. brutally shot his parents and his 4 siblings whilst they slept in their bed.
That happened. That's fact. That is fact.
Just a year later, George and Kathleen Lutz purchased and moved into the home for the bargain price of just $80,000. Which even then was a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
And it also included much of the Defoe's furniture.
Obviously, everyone was dead. They just left everything where it was.
Yeah. The Lutz family only stayed in the home for 28 days before being terrorised out of their home by a demonic presence.
So then in May in 1975, which was 5 months after the Lutz had left, Ed and Lorraine investigated the home along with a news crew to document the findings. Because it got quite a lot of traction. I think the Lutz family had been quite vocal about why they left.
Yeah.
And obviously with the Defoe murders, it was quite an infamous house. So because of that, they knew the murders had taken place. So they must have been complete non-believers to even buy the house.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I would be okay living in a house where only a year before people had been violently murdered.
Yeah, if it had been like 20, 30 years before, if it had been, a certain amount of time, then perhaps, but that recently, it would still be fresh. That scar would still be there.
Yeah. During this investigation, Ed was actually physically pushed to the floor while he was using some religious provocation in the basement. Lorraine was so overwhelmed by the sense of this demonic presence, and she was plagued by like psychic impressions of the Defoe family bodies laid along the floor, covered in white sheets. And
Would
she
have happened when they were found.
Yeah. She was physically pushed away as well. Also, there was an infrared camera time lapse that picked up the image of a demonic boy standing at the bottom of the staircase.
Child.
Yep. The Warrens then concluded that this house was shockingly inhabited by an evil supernatural entity due to its violent history. So they do say that some ghosts and some spirits, some entities they don't haunt the place they died, and they're not necessarily ghosts as in they were spirits. Some demonic presences are built and created out of violent things happening there,
and they feed on fear, they feed on sorrow, they feed on anger, rage. It makes them stronger.
So the Warrens has decided that basically this demonic presence wasn't a spirit of anyone who died there. It was a presence that was created because of the violence that had occurred.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I was at to take a deep breath. You can go.
Okay. There are some aspects of Ed and Lorraine's account of this case that were portrayed in the opening series of the 2016 film The Conjuring 2.
Which is the one you haven't seen.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. The reported haunting was the basis for the 1977 book The Amityville Horror, which was adapted into the 1979 and 2005 films of the same name, and it also served as an inspiration for the film series that followed.
So that must be the film series is the one that you've seen, the Amityville
Asylum. Yeah.
But yeah, the 2005 film is the Ryan Reynolds one.
Yeah.
According to Benjamin Radford, who was also a paranormal investigator at the time, he said that this whole story was refuted by eyewitnesses, investigations, and forensic evidence. But in 1979, a lawyer named William Weber stated that it was he, Jay Anston, and the occupants of the house had invented the story over many bottles of wine.
So
since the Warrens have refuted that.
So the Warrens have said that it's real.
It happened.
They've got this visual evidence of it.
Yeah.
And yet the people say it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
But could they potentially have created something in their imaginations which is then actually manifested?
That is possible. That is a possibility, definitely. But yeah, the Amityville Horror is a really, really good film. Obviously, it's horrific what happened, and it does have the beginning of the film. There's no spoilers in this, dude, because I know we're going to watch it. But at the beginning, it starts with news clippings, and news reports of the Defoe murders. So actually, like they took the real life reports, they took the real life news clippings, and that's how the movie starts.
Okay, that's fun.
Yeah, and then Ryan Reynolds plays, I think it's like a George Lutz type person, who then, obviously you've seen the asylum, you know that there's demonic thoughts. He goes a little bit crazy, and they kind of link it to Defoe in a way. They kind of say that they basically make it out in the film that Defoe did this because he was possessed, he was having these demonic thoughts, he was being led, rather than him actually just deciding to kill his entire family.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, it's really cool. We'll watch it. I think it's got Naomi Fisher in as his wife. Don't know why that's just come to me.
Probably has.
I might be making that up.
Now, from movies to TV series, this is a place that if you're in England, and you're into the paranormal, you've probably heard of this place.
Mm-hmm.
And the TV series starring Matthew McFadden, beautiful voice.
His voice, I would listen to him read his shopping list.
Yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, it had him and Timothy Spall, wasn't it? That was a fantastic TV show, and there's also a lot of
scary shit. There.
There's a lot of paranormal investigation companies throughout the UK that actually offer investigations there. I'd be intrigued to go, but also at the same time, No. No. We are, of course, talking about the Enfield poltergeist.
Yeah. The TV show was called The Enfield Haunting.
Yeah. In 1977, the Warrens came over to England and investigated claims that a family in the North London suburb of Enfield was haunted by poltergeist activity. Whilst a number of independent observers dismissed the incident as a hoax carried out by attention-hungry children, the Warrens were convinced that it was a case of demonic possession.
Yeah, the TV show kind of showed that. It had a lot of jumpy bits, but also it had like, when the classic poltergeist activity is where you walk out of a kitchen, you walk back in, and all the cupboards are open.
Yeah,
it had that, didn't it? And it also had things flying around the room, and obviously the children being possessed.
Well, there's the iconic picture of it. If you Google the Enfield haunting, there is that iconic picture of one of the girls being lifted, like levitating from the bed, being thrown. And you hear voices, and one of the girls speaks in the voice of this poltergeist, and there are actually recordings of her doing that. And you can refute it, yeah, but it would be very, very difficult for a young girl to achieve that voice.
Yeah.
But they do believe, though, that adolescents, particularly girls, because of the hormonal changes that they go through, attract and emphasise the powers of a poltergeist. The poltergeists are more likely to attach themselves to hormonal teenagers.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting fact for you. And this story was the inspiration for The Conjuring 2. Although critics do say that the Warrens were involved to a far lesser degree than was portrayed in the film, and in fact had shown up to the scene uninvited and had actually been refused admittance to the home.
I don't remember in the TV show if the Warrens were portrayed in it.
I don't think they were. It was just the British Paranormal Society?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, which is still, I think there's a variation of it still running today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to take an intermission here because we've run out of wine and no one can continue a dark cup of Histortea without and it wouldn't be a Halloween episode if we weren't a little bit inebriated. If you want to listen back to our Halloween episode of 2018 it's called Hello There, We've Been Expecting You, that you will hear us there. So we shall be back in one moment. But while we're gone, here's our friend talking about their podcast.
Hey listeners, my name is Julia Johnson and I am the host of Figure It Out podcast, where I have funny guests and cool people come on my show and we talk about very interesting things such as hot mess moments, embarrassing moments, just being an overall mess together. If you are interested and you're ready to laugh, you're ready to cry, you're ready to feel all the feelings. Just kidding, you won't cry, I promise. You're ready to relate, then my podcast is the one for you. You can check out Figure It Out by Julia Johnson on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Anchor, and wherever you listen. Thank you.
And welcome back. We are ready, we've topped up our wine, and we're going to go straight in with Cheyenne Johnson.
Cheyenne.
Pardon?
Cheyenne.
Cheyenne. See, this is why Carrie does the words. I thought I would try and do it and butcher. I'm not good with the words if you've been a listener
good with the
of us.
word.
I am not good with the words. But in 1981, 19-year-old
Anne Cheyenne Johnson
was accused of killing his landlord, Alan Bono. Ed and Lorraine were called prior to this to deal with an alleged demonic possession of the younger brother of Johnson's fiancée.
So there's demons in the family.
Yeah, and so Ed and Lorraine were already knew the case, they knew the family, so they were already involved before this happened. Because like we said, it turns out it was only a year before this, so in 1980, that the 11-year-old brother of Johnson's fiancée, who happened to actually also be on the scene for the Bono murder. Okay. Don't really know why, there's not that much detail on that. But he was treated for demonic possession by various different priests and Ed and Lorraine. Johnson was involved in the exorcism of his fiance's brother and said that he had been affected because of it.
So the demon had gone from one to the other.
Yeah. The Warrens subsequently claimed that Johnson was now also possessed. At his murder trial, Johnson attempted to plead not guilty for reasons of demonic possession, but was unsuccessful with this plea.
I can imagine that wouldn't go down too well with the skeptical, level-headed judge.
No. His defense lawyer did then, obviously, because that was thrown out, they then went on for self-defense, and he got 5 years in prison for manslaughter.
Okay.
So,
good lawyer.
Yeah, so that was the actual outcome of that. But this story has served as the inspiration for the Conjuring movie, The Devil Made Me Do It, which is out in 2021. So next year's
spoilers, we have not
Conjuring. Well, nobody has seen this. That is going to be the premise of that movie. And the case was then described in a book in 1983 called The Devil in Connecticut by Gerald Brittle.
I've heard of that book.
Yeah.
Never read it, but I have heard of it.
Yeah. So it's like it was an infamous case. It's one of the first times they actually had tried to use demonic possession as a self-defense, as a defense. Yeah. So that'll be cool in the new Conjuring that is out next year.
In 1986, the Snedeker family moved to Southington, Connecticut, into a house that had at one time been a funeral home. Smooth. In the basement, they found various mortuary items, as you would, including a hoist for coffins, a medical gurney, blood drains, and toe tags.
Great. Yeah. And so, not so shockingly enough, the Snedekers reported all kinds of evil. Now, these ones that they're reporting included sexual acts, apparitions, and abrupt, violent personality changes in their oldest son. But it is to note that he was undergoing treatment for Hodgkin's disease.
Okay.
Which is, I think, the biggest part of being possibly a believer is refuting the impossible, because then what else is left? However impossible is probable.
All right, Sherlock.
Yeah, I'm very proud of myself.
After the family basically reached a level of desperation, they didn't really know where to turn. They reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren and begged them to investigate their home. The Warrens did investigate the house, and they officially proclaimed it possessed, and that the home was infested with demons and evil spirits. They see demons everywhere they go.
They do.
Yeah. The case was featured in the 1993 book In a Dark Place, The Story of a True Haunting.
And then that was then turned into a TV film that later became part of the Discovery Channel series A Haunting in 2002.
Oh, I might want to watch that.
Yeah, and then I don't know if you've heard of the movie The Haunting in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was filmed and based loosely on the Warrens' version of events. And it was released in 2009.
Okay. The Smurl family.
Smurl.
From 1974 to 1987, the Smurls claimed that they were at the mercy of ghosts in their home on Chase Street duplex in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. Initially, the episodes were fairly benign. Tools went missing, then reappeared. Old wall stains seeped through fresh coats of paint. Wall stains even through fresh coats of paint, and then kitchen appliances caught fire even though they were unplugged, and awful odours overwhelmed the house, only to disperse moments later. So it started off like mild inconveniences, and then got pretty damn inconvenient.
Yeah, Janet, who was like the mum of the family, because I think there was a husband and a wife who was Janet and Jack. Then there was Mary, who was Jack's mother, and her husband lived with them. Plus, they had children.
Yeah.
So, Mary and Janet claimed that they heard voices that sounded like each other when the other one wasn't in the house. And Janet thought she heard her mother-in-law calling her name, while Mary thought she'd heard Janet and Jack in the throes of an argument that was full of swear words. Which I'm guessing, because that is stated, it was unlike them.
Yeah. Plus the era, it wasn't really seemly to swear. ominous black masses formed and floated throughout the home. And Janet said she was visited in the dead of night by a malevolent force that molested her in her sleep. And then Jack started to experience it. So far it's just the wife and the mother-in-law. Jack started experiencing the horror in his home. He was lying in bed with Janet. He heard someone whispering, a young woman by the sounds of it. And then when he turned to face his wife, he watched a shadowy figure run up her leg.
Which then, I guess, goes with her
being molested.
Yeah. The light fixtures then began falling from the ceiling. One of them actually fell and hurt one of the children, as well as the family dog was thrown against the wall. I'm not okay with them hurting the dog. I know, right? Janet was said to have been picked up by an invisible presence, dangled some 6 feet in the air, and then thrown across the room.
That must have been quite frightening.
Yeah.
Jack then claimed, the husband, claimed a succubus entered the living room and raped him whilst a baseball game played on the TV.
It's very specific about the baseball game.
Yeah, I mean, was he miffed that he was missing the baseball?
I don't know.
Terrified, they contacted the Warrens. Yeah. So at this point, they were that bad that even the neighbours reported hearing screams from them whilst the family was out. So something was screaming in the house whilst they were out. It was that bad, the house was screaming.
Nope.
The Smells contacted the Warrens and they came and inspected the house. And Lorraine concluded that the Smells shared their home with 4 spirits: a harmless elderly woman, a young and possibly violent girl, a man who suffered and died in that home, and a demon that used the other 3 spirits to destroy the Smell family. Their version of the story was the subject of the 1986 paperback titled The Haunted, and television film of the same name directed by Robert Mandel. I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, definitely. Things like that are just called like The Haunted or The Haunting, which we're coming to in a minute. It's like, you know them because it's such a, I guess because it's such a solid name.
I think I sort of stumbled across it when I was looking for, because there's a, what's his name? He wrote The Sepulchre. It's James something or other, and he's a horror writer, and he's as bad as Stephen King. James Herbert, that was it. He wrote a couple of books called Haunted and Ghosts of Sleeth, which the Ghosts of Sleeth is the only book I've ever put down because I've been too scared to read.
Oh, wow.
Genuinely.
That's pretty hardcore then.
So, yeah, I was looking for that, and that's when I came across this, The Haunted.
The last case we're going to discuss that the Warrens were part of, like we said, they've been part of 10,000. But the last one we're going to talk about is Union Cemetery. Now, the Union Cemetery is settled in a small town of eastern Connecticut, and it contains graves which date back to the 1600s, and which I know this might sound morbid, but I don't mind walking around a cemetery to look at the graves, peaceful, especially when they go back that far.
Yeah.
But it's the unmarked graves which are causing the most stir in this cemetery. Inside one such grave is said to exist a young woman who passed away in her mid to late 20s during childbirth. She is the most told story of the cemetery and is known to be quite the prankster, which I'd like to think is how I would be. If I was a ghost, I'd like to think I'd be a bit of a prankster. Almost like Peeves in Harry Potter.
I'd be a nightmare for like ghost hunt investigators. Like, they're like some most haunted, because watching other serious ghost investigators, I find them quite funny now. And it's like, is someone here? I would literally pop up behind them and go, hello.
Or I'll be like, is anyone here? Nope.
Could you please leave? Or, and I know this is completely gross, but genuinely just for the laughs, I would just walk up behind them and make farting noises. Like, just make them turn around.
That's such a child thing to say.
But just imagine it, you know, you've got poor Yvette Fielding just walking in, and if you ever do listen to this, Yvette, I'm sorry, but just walking through a house on her own, just like, and just doing her VT bit, and then all of a sudden, behind her.
Oh dear. Anyway,
we have a great afterlife.
So this young woman has been seen by hundreds of people and has become known as the White Lady.
Oh no.
Woman
in white.
There's many women in white.
Oh.
Yeah, women in white. I don't know why they're always in white, but they there's many a folklore about them. But this specific White Lady is described as having long dark hair, wearing what looks like a white nightgown and a bonnet, and is usually sighted on the roadway along Route 59. So I do apologise if anyone drives down Route 59.
Take a detour.
People driving down there and past the cemetery have reported seeing the woman along the edge or travelling through the graveyard. This includes cops who have stopped to patrol the area.
Oh, great. The police see her too.
Yep.
Oh, good.
One such incident happened in 1993. It involved, now this was ridiculous when I was looking into these case files, dude. This involved an off-duty firefighter who was travelling home when he hit this supposed woman. It left a large dent in the front of his car, but when he got out of the car to check, there was no one there.
Oh, no. I mean, firstly, why would you get out of the car?
Because he thought it hit somebody. He didn't know. It made a noise. It made a dent. He probably felt the bumps. He got out to see if he'd killed someone. You would get out. It's called a hit and run if you don't carry.
I wouldn't say I'd leave. I would stay in the car and call the police.
Okay, I'll give you that one. But yeah, he got out and there was nobody there to be found whatsoever.
Great.
Yep.
Multiple police calls have been made in the middle of the night. Yet when the police go there, they're empty-handed each time. There's literally nothing to be found.
Yep.
Ed Warren wrote a book on the graveyard True Hauntings from an old New England cemetery in 1992, and he's actually claimed to capture her essence on film. They also speak of the Red Eyes Ghost, which is a pair of red mysterious eyes which can be seen in the forest behind the graveyard itself. These eyes should not be confused with the eyes seen within the graveyard, which are two bike reflectors on a piece of wood and moved around by locals to scare teens. The eyes belong to Earl Kellogg, a man who was set afire across the street and burned to death in 1935.
So yeah, they've claimed, and he also claims to have video evidence of that. Now, I got a lot of our research off actually the I've forgotten what was the acronym, NESPA, that's it, off their website, which is called TonySpearer.com. Is the NSPER website, and they basically have a section called case files, and it has the most infamous files and cases that the Warrens have ever been involved with, and it has a lot more information that than I wrote down for this, because we've only got a little while to discuss and we don't need to go into every detail. But if you are interested, go to the website and there's a lot more detail on all of those, as well as videos and pictures of this, like the figure that he captured her essence. There's actually a picture of it on their website. That's so cool. You can physically see that. So Carrie, now we've discussed the Warrens, what do you think? Do you think that do you believe what they saw? Do you think they believed what they saw? Do you think they were trying to get money? What do you feel? I
believe that they believed it. And there's a lot of evidence potentially for. There is also evidence against. I'm a believing skeptic, because I do believe, and I've seen and experienced too much in my life not to believe. And when you were talking about the one where what was their name? The Smile family, where they heard their own voices elsewhere in the house. I do remember one incident where I was in my brother's bedroom, which was across the hall from where my mum's and dad's bedroom used to be. And I was talking to my brother, and I could see out the corner of my eye my mum lying on the bed, and I thought, oh, she's gone for a lie down, she's probably got a headache. And then I was talking to my brother, and I heard my mum call my name from downstairs. And I looked back into the bedroom. There was no one there. Mum was downstairs in the kitchen. But I am prepared to swear on anything you put in front of me, on my father's grave, that she was lying on that bed.
That's creepy. I don't like your mum's house anyway. I mean, I love the house. It's a beautiful house, but it's a creepy house. Yeah, it is a creepy house. I've seen and experienced too much not to believe, but at the same time, if I experience something, the first thing I do is look for a rational explanation. Yeah. Because, the curtains could be blowing, but is the window open? Is there a crack a crack in the glass? Anything like that? Yeah. If you hear a noise in the night, is there a lot of wood in the house? Could it be settling? Is the heating just come on? Things like that. Could it be the plumbing? So
you look for the rational explanation, but I've also seen too much not to.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. But so obviously they have come under quite a lot of criticism. There's actually an investigation into them, which was called Hunting the Ghost Hunters. This was by Perry DeAngelis and Stephen Novella, which you can find online. They actually did a whole investigation into the Warrens, as well as there's an example on an episode. There's a podcast called Skeptoid.
Yeah.
And they discuss The Conjuring and whether it is true or not. And obviously that's gonna happen. But whether or not you believe in the Warrens, you cannot underestimate the impact that their cases and that them as people have had on the recent horror popular culture.
Well, they've created or been a part of the creation of folklore,
Yeah.
haven't they? It's urban legend.
Yeah, and Annabelle is likely to go down as one of horror's like creepiest, spookiest, awful. I say villains in like inverted commas.
Yeah.
Because when I think of villain, I think of a murderer or a thief, an actual protagonist, a villain. But
she is an antagonist of sorts.
Yeah, so I would put her up there with Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
Jason Voorhees.
Mike Myers.
Yeah.
Not
Pennywise.
Mike Myers. She doesn't like clowns, people.
Pennywise, like, she is going to go down as... You say Annabelle, you see that creepy China doll.
I'm sorry, but if anyone buys a child of mine a doll, I'm getting that thing exercised before I even give it to the kid.
Yeah, but like I said, I actually think the Raggedy Ann doll is worse than the China doll, personally.
So...
Yes.
Normally at this stage we would do ridiculous deaths.
We would.
Because we are doing a dark cup of Histortea, we're doing ridiculous after deaths or afterlives or ridiculous ghosts. Now at the start of this, Em told me, I don't want you to read this, I want to see your reaction when I read it. So, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to read this, and I'm reading it as it is because this is for real. A article that was written in the New York Times on April the 21st, 1896.
Okay.
And what he was writing, he believed in.
Right.
And it was entitled, Flatbush Has a Ghost. It has returned for its hand, which Mr. Norton dug up.
Okay.
That was the article. So, the old town of Flatbush was the 29th ward of Brooklyn, and they had a ghost. A Simon Pure, sure enough ghost. The nightly walks on East Broadway near Northstand Avenue and stops at the house of Charles Norton to make inquiries for a hand that it lost there many years ago while its restless spirit was the flesh.
Knock, knock, knock. Hello, do you have my hand?
Pretty much, but as a ghost. Yeah, that's great. These visits were obviously not fully appreciated by Norton or his wife. But it appears that Norton is to blame for the appearance of the ghosts because, and this is what the newspaper called him, his ghost ship was not heard of until Norton, while searching for gold in his cellar, dug up the hand that had lain undisturbed for years.
I mean, would you not question the fact that you found a hand in your cellar?
It gets funnier.
Okay.
There was a ring on one of the fingers of this exhumed hand, which Norton then decided to rub. This, he did it in true Arabian Nights fashion.
Genie?
Not a genie. It had, as he had failed to get instructions from Norton, this actually brought the Flatbush ghost. So he rubbed the ring, hoping for a genie to grant him 3 wishes. He gets a ghost. It is now said that all the ghost wants is his hand back and the ring, and thereafter it will cease worrying the descendants of the Dutch in Flatbush.
Okay.
So it's just a ghost who just wants his hand back.
It's reasonable.
Isn't it, though?
I mean, I would ask the ghost, where is the rest of you to put it back to?
Fact. The story is that the old Dutchman, this is the ghost, this is his ghost ship.
Okay.
Dutchman is in the town tell of a ghost that is 60 years old and a belated traveller who had lots of gold in his belt.
Mm-hmm.
He stayed over at the farmhouse of one Krug, who was a thrifty Dutch farmer.
Yeah.
Krug, when he heard of the large amounts of gold that this visitor had on him, he gave up his room so that the stranger could have somewhere nice to sleep. The next day, the visitor had disappeared. When the family asked Krug where he had gone, he simply said that the man had departed before daybreak. They also noted that the bedclothes were missing, to which Krug said that he had burnt it because the stranger had just recovered from yellow fever.
Realistic.
Subsequently, a man's hand was found behind the bed. It had been cut off by Krug with an axe. When the hand was found, Krug disappeared and the hand was buried.
So they didn't find the rest of him, but they found his hand.
Yeah, because it was behind the bed.
Right.
The head of the bed. Which...
Did you not, notice that the hand was missing and to look around for it?
I don't even know. Mrs. Norton, so this is the woman, the wife of the guy who tried to make a genie out of a ring, was speaking of the ghost and its uncanny visits and said that the house was haunted, and these are her words. This is Mrs. Norton's words. Everybody who has lived here since the murder was done under this roof has had bad luck. One man who occupied the house about 40 years ago left his wife and children and ran away with another man's wife. Another was a burglar, and when he was caught, a lot of silverware was found in the cellar. Another committed suicide. We've been here for 6 years now, and there's been nothing but sickness in our family. I don't like to talk about these things. It sends a chill down my back. Now, Norton was hunting for this supposed silverware that was buried in his cellar, and he dug up 2 revolutionary swords and several pieces of ancient coin before he unearthed the hand. So he was trying to find this elusive silverware in his basement when he came across a mummified hand and rubbed the ring, and poof, we have a ghost.
I'm sorry, if you are digging in your cellar and you find a mummified hand, would your first reaction to be to pick up the hand and go, "Oh, I shall rub this ring"?
Apparently so.
My first reaction would be, I ain't touching that nasty thing, get the police.
So yeah, that ghost, but all he wanted was his hand back.
Yeah. I mean, could they not give him his hand back, or just say, "Can you please, friendly ghost, point us to where your body is buried, because surely you would know, it being your body, and we shall reunite your hand with your body, or bring your body back and give you a proper burial"? That would be nice.
Yeah. So that is the tale of a ridiculous ghost that was in the New York Times in 1896. The Flatbush Ghost.
Dear Mr. Flatbush Dutchman Ghost, we condole you.
We'll have a second. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to A Dark Cup of Histortea. We've hoped you enjoyed it. You can check out our other podcast, which is just a nice cup of Histortea, on all of the places you find podcasts, whatever you're listening to now. But also we're on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, blah, 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 blah.
So many.
Yep, you can also find us on Instagram at
A Nice Cup of Histortea.
And Facebook.
A Nice Cup of Histortea.
And we will be back with you soon. I don't want to give a date or a time because we don't know. We might go into lockdown again. We don't know.
We don't know. But we will find a way, and we will keep updating you with the history that you know and love, as well as bringing you occasional segments of the darker side.
Happy Halloween.